Hi, and welcome back to another video with Dragonfly Awakening. Today I would like to talk about spirituality and mental health, how the two are intertwined, how the two are separate, and how important it could be to implement therapy alongside of spiritual development. What I'm going to share with you today could potentially save you years, if not decades, in your own spiritual awakening process. Now, this talk isn't necessarily for everyone. There are many people who have grown up in intact, healthy families, had a good upbringing, and even a good early adulthood. Those people may likely have less of a need to check in with their mental health as others, but I still have dropped some significant tips in both the spiritual and mental health aspects that I think everyone could benefit from. So let's get into it. Many people have encountered life-shattering events in their early life, which created a series of lessons for them to navigate and eventually overcome. And there seems to be a tendency to seek understanding and remedy for what we went through spirituality. I'm talking about those who seek healing from their psychological traumas, through religion or spirituality, meaning there's often the hope that through some sort of spiritual or religious practice, God will take their trauma away. Unfortunately, it doesn't work this way. So let's look at why some people take this route over the other. One common reason why people often seek religion or spirituality in place of mental health treatment is simply because we may not know any better. Some people might even see the two as equal. But today I'd like to discuss with you the importance of knowing the difference between the two and how each can vastly affect your life. Most of us come from, if it isn't a family trend, then simply a society tradition that is biased in the religious mind frame. For example, for centuries we've been told that when bad things happen to us, it's because we've done something wrong and we're being punished. There are so many things wrong with this statement. But fortunately, society is advancing and we no longer have to think in this way. We understand now why things go wrong, and we also know how to remedy things that do. We know that people who hurt other people are also hurt themselves, and they're simply repeating the cycle. But the archaic thinking that says we're being punished and need to seek approval through religion or spirituality is still prevalent in some places. And when someone is implicated in it, it only compiles more harmful feelings like guilt or shame on top of someone who is already hurting. This only compounds the problem and adds more work for the person to go through. Seeking healing for psychological trauma through spirituality has probably been a very common solution, especially in the years prior to the development of modern psychology, which has only been around for about 125 years. And for this reason, it also has no doubt shaped the world we live in. But the long lesson that I had learned is that this is not the correct solution for healing trauma. With spirituality and counseling both taking place deep within our inner workings, they can indeed offer some solace reciprocally, but they are not mutually exclusive. They are two separate things with two separate purposes. Simply said, they both can, hand in hand, assist each other if they are utilized together, but they can also both delay the end goal if one seeks one over the other. An example of this would be from my own life, where one of my parents went through some very traumatic experiences growing up. Never sought treatment, let alone ever talked about it with anyone, and just continued through life seeking remedy through dogmatic religious thought, not spirituality, but through religion. Ideas, rules, laws, commandments, and the notion of having to carry one's cross until maybe possibly being healed after death, if she goes to heaven. This did not include a deeper sense of introspection, where she could have encountered her own spiritual experiences to help in opening up had she sought it. This way of thinking left her in a place where she was unable to fully grow, mature, accept people for who they are, to love and to feel compassion for herself and for others. It was not only destructive in the further development of her own life, but also in the lives of her children, who were of course forced to grow up in the same mold. Despite growing up in that sort of home, I somehow intuitively knew that there was a lack of love and substance in it. After leaving the nest, I sought understanding and healing through spirituality. I didn't know any better. I repeated a pattern, just through a different religion. However, it was only through my own unfortunate experiences, many years later as an adult, that I learned that through the retention of my trauma, there were still some negative inherent tendencies, unhealthy behaviors, and false beliefs that had still hampered me from living a full, healthy, and happy life. My living situation was different, but somehow I had some problems, all despite having a relatively fulfilling spiritual routine. In realizing this, I was finally able to see the importance of mental health treatment. Yay! I'm not implying that spirituality cannot heal us, but I think that in most cases when it comes to trauma, especially severe trauma, psychology is the better path to follow in order to resolve the malformed and unhealed personality. Healing the person first, or at least concurrent with the spiritual path, better aids in understanding who we are, our path, and our place in the universe. The point I want to make here is the psychological process of therapy is the healing path that you are seeking. There's a notion, or perhaps it's just human nature, to think that we can go to God or spirituality to be freed from the pain of our past traumas and be healed. I say human nature because, similar to a child who runs to their parent after falling down and getting hurt, we as adults tend to run to God, our Heavenly Father or Mother, who can offer solace or comfort. But like children, as an adult, the parent is still incapable of taking away the pain. The child or the parent still needs to wash and dress the wound in order to promote healing. And when it comes to psychological trauma, it being a lot more complicated than physical trauma, we need to face the situation, face the pain, and do some work to mitigate the negative effects it will have on our future in order to promote healing. So by this example, it helps us to see that seeking spirituality in place of therapy for our past traumas is not the proper forum for facilitating what we actually need. And in this case, we don't actually know what we need because the trauma has eclipsed so much of our periphery. It is therefore best to have the guidance of a trained professional who understands the mapping of the mind under the traumatic circumstances and how to remedy that. Again, the psychological process of therapy is the healing that you are seeking. Another component in healing has to do with free will. Resolution of the mental health portion of our past traumas is still a free will choice, even when we have overcome the immediate trauma from the event, sought and progressed on the spiritual path too. If you don't know that, then you won't get healing in that area. Understand that if you go to spirituality, you will receive spiritual understanding, upliftment, and so on. But understand that spirituality will not give you the wider view of the complexities of your trauma-based experiences. When addressing trauma through the mental health field, we are able to address the many different ways we were affected in our programming, whereas spirituality, there will likely be many stones left unturned, stones under which our free will need to likely be engaged in so as to change them. For a simplified example, one who grew up with an abusive parent has a malformed ego or personality. Religion or spirituality may have offered some comfort and strength in moving toward the future, but it doesn't rewrite the psychology of the person that needs to become normalized. And those unturned stones may be a series of false beliefs that we yet need to reprogram. This means reshaping a healthier version of ourselves. One who has coped with their trauma in some way or another may feel better about what had happened and now lives a normal life. But he or she may still hold on to unconscious limiting beliefs such as, I'll never be good enough to have a spouse that'll never cheat on me. Or, I've learned to be happy even though I'll never be financially abundant. Or, my life will just get worse if I cut off contact from my narcissist parent. So unfortunately, even though one may have gotten over the depression from the past, one may not have developed the tools to move forward successfully in an abundant, healthy, happy, and prosperous living. So when it comes to our destructive beliefs, hiding in our shadows, the divine cannot take that away from us. It is our property. We first must be able to see that we have these types of belief systems and understand why we believe what we believe. That is how your freedom of choice or free will can trap you in the byproducts of your trauma. Now, I do want to say that shadow work, which is what this would be, is a very powerful tool. However, it is more beneficial for one who has developed a significant spiritual awareness, the ability to see into your shadows or subconscious mind. I would never say that it is appropriate as a first response to trauma. I find it more common with adults who have gotten through most of their baggage and have only pinpointed a few lingering limited beliefs to resolve. But for a person with severe trauma, starting in the field of spirituality, trauma tends to eclipse a lot of the things in both the conscious and subconscious parts of the mind. So if the problem started with the mind, it'll be easiest to work with the mind to resolve it with the mind. Getting back to the broader topic at hand, I'd like to mention that there are some spiritual techniques out there that can be drastically misunderstood. An example would be the practice of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is an extraordinarily beneficial practice in spirituality, but one needs to be of a solid mental framework in order to truly understand and follow the teachings. In seeking spirituality for resolving trauma, many people would not see the bigger picture of finding your smaller self encompassed in the larger self. The larger self which you are a part of. One could potentially see it as a practice to disassociate oneself mentally from all the aspects of the human experience or ego. Even the very common belief that we must rid ourselves of our egos is a dangerously misunderstood concept in spirituality. The true purpose behind the idea is that it is okay to have some egoic identification, but in the context of knowing who you are in the vast universal perspective. That's where we need to be. Using spiritual techniques to disassociate oneself from the personal ego can prevent us from accessing that part of ourselves that is still hurt, and thus not be able to understand the purpose for which we went through those experiences in the first place. Bypassing the human experience for the purpose of only developing your spiritual side creates a very unbalanced person. It is only sweeping the dust under the rug into the shadows of the subconscious. And if the ego was malformed, the personality will continue with its unhealthy patterns, destructive behavior, or self-sabotage. And if you have a kick of becoming a spiritual teacher, that can be very dangerous for the people you are trying to guide. So, if we need healing, we still must go directly to the raw human experience and address our still very human aspects. The person I once knew had a very unfortunate upbringing, filled with abuse and neglect, a childhood I could never wish upon anyone. This person had later pursued spirituality for obvious reasons, and just happened to be an advanced soul. He found considerable rewards through his efforts. He became well versed in energy work, in psychic perception, and the ability to help guide others into deeper states of awareness. A number of other people, including himself, considered him a spiritual teacher. Yet parts of him remained unhealed, which were unfortunately palpable to others with a broader awareness. I do know that this person had sought therapy at one time or another, but never found a resolution, and eventually abandoned the idea. And sometimes when a person unlocks their spiritual gifts or psychic abilities, they can develop a spiritual ego, which is what happened with this person. And when that happens, one can tend to forget the stored trauma that he or she continues to carry around inside of them. And it just becomes a sore thumb that others can see when he or she cannot. Becoming unbalanced in this way can be very dangerous when trying to guide others. It's because of tremendous blind spots and even blinding arrogance. This only harms their students, even when their intentions are good. This person I'm talking about was a very well-loved person, but unfortunately and ultimately an ineffective spiritual teacher, at least on the greater spectrum. Now, I do not want to imply, even for a second, that seeking understanding through spirituality after traumatic experiences is wrong. It isn't. In fact, it's important to know that the unpleasant events we experience in life are things that we signed up for prior to taking a human birth. We do this so that we can learn from these important lessons and perhaps even help others who have gone through these same types of experiences. Also, it is important to gain the spiritual perspective as to why this is, to overcome, to grow, and to eventually transcend our human understanding and experiences. Obstacles are not meant to be avoided or removed. They are to be encountered and overcome. This is the learning experience we are meant to encounter, and so is the purpose of our healing path. It is important to interact with our human experience. In essence, our difficult experiences very much have a purpose in the self-betterment of our lives. In terms of healing from severe trauma, the understanding of how one was affected and how to become free from it is the sweet spot. So, seek the appropriate venue for addressing what needs to be addressed. It would not be any more appropriate for us to seek spirituality through psychology as it would be to seek healing of severe traumas through spirituality. Though spirituality and psychology are both parallel paths inside of our deeper selves, they are not mutually exclusive, as I've mentioned before. The psychological process of therapy is the healing that you are seeking. Now you might ask, why am I going through all this trouble to write about this when I'm a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner? I have seen with my own eyes that some trauma can indeed be healed through the process of quantum healing hypnosis, spirituality in a sense. But I've also encountered people who have had decades of trauma shown up at my door without ever spent a day working on it, just hoping that I can make it disappear. My friends, it doesn't work this way. And I've said above, your human experiences have happened for a reason and have a journey for you along the path of healing. I realize it can seem scary bumping up against that wall of resistance within you. But if you only take the time to have the self-love and self-compassion, you'll find that the person on the other side holding up that wall is you. It's the lost soldier who didn't know that the war was over. It's just important that as much of this stuff as possible is done consciously, because you're meant to learn from the process. Places inside of you that are affected are places that you're going to need to access later in your healed life. Time for spring cleaning. The little remnants of stuff in the shadows, no problem. We can get rid of those through direct healing. But the big stuff is about discovering how powerful you are. It's not as effective or even fair if someone else took it away from you. No one can take away from you what you're meant to learn, because there's an amazing gift on the other side of it. So let's start talking about healing. Fortunately for us, we live in the age of information, and the explosion of information which is available for free on YouTube is simply astounding. There are endless videos on both the deepest spiritual teachings as well as the most complex mental health issues. Seek and ye shall find. Search and you will find the answers. Heck, you can even start your therapy with ChatGPT to help pinpoint the areas you might benefit from help in. I'd like to encourage you to begin your quest by searching for videos on helping you understand what you went through, alongside of searching for a qualified therapist or counselor. And let me leave you with one quick noteworthy item regarding seeking mental health treatment. There is nothing wrong with seeking therapy or counseling. In this crazy and complicated world, it is important that we get as much guidance as we can, even if it is just to confirm that we've got the proper understanding in the situation that we might be experiencing. Even in my own life, when I encountered some intermediate level challenges, I sought a counselor to help me. He just helped me confirm if I was understanding the situation correctly and responding appropriately. Simply knowing that I got a thumbs up from him helped reinforce not only my confidence in that situation, but in myself as well. Seeking counseling helped me develop more self-confidence and gave me tools to help me along in the future. But the other important thing that I want to mention is that the arena of mental health professionals can be a little daunting, and like Big Pharma, there can be a few little traps to try to steer clear of. I would say it would be best to do some research as to what different modalities of therapy are out there. Learn a little about them to find which ones resonate with you. Then shop around for different therapists and counselors to find one that jives with you. One of the first counselors I encountered in helping me unravel my own childhood trauma used only the psychotherapy method. I had spent a lot of time and money just talking the whole time with little to no feedback aside from acknowledging my feelings. Granted, having the chance to talk about my past was very helpful, and it actually did help release some of those tough emotions, which then lifted some weight off my chest. However, this was just the beginning of the healing process, and it did not provide any context as to why the things that happened to me happened. That the negative feelings I carried with me were not only not my fault, but they were not my own, and were merely projections from an abusive and unhealed parent. It wasn't until a few therapists later that someone was able to help me to understand what a narcissist is, how they operate, and how to break free from their mode of operation. How to learn what self-esteem was, how to feel worthy of having self-esteem, and learning how to find my own self and in essence rewrite or rewire my own psychology to that of a healthy individual who believes he is worthy of living a happy and prosperous life of his own. It took years with different modalities, even decades, to get through this whole process, because I did give up on therapy for some time and put spirituality in its place. And so this is why I want to save you those years or even decades so that you can effectively embark on your healing journey alongside of your spiritual journey. The most important advice I can give in regards to both the subject of spirituality and mental health is be patient with yourself. I cannot stress how important this is. You cannot rush your healing, and you cannot rush your awakening. Trust the divine timing and know that what you have experienced in the past leads to greater realization, purpose, and what you will experience in the future will be of soul purpose. Be patient, learn, analyze, and apply. In this process, you will find what works for you and what doesn't. As long as you proceed with purpose, passion, and love, you cannot go wrong. I will relay to you one of the most important universal truths that says, it is promised to you that if you continue on this path of healing, purpose, passion, and love, all things previously taken from you will be restored to you exponentially. There is indeed a purpose to this crazy human experience. You just have to stick with your journey, and all these blessings will follow through to you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it brought you some wisdom that'll help guide you along a better path for getting through your healing and awakening process. Let me know if you have questions or suggestions down below. If you like this content, please check out our other playlists here on this channel. We have other videos on meditation, guidance, on spiritual awakening, even divination. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you'd like to book a one-on-one meditation lesson, coaching, quantum healing hypnosis session, or energy healing, please visit us at www.dragonflightawakening.com for more information and scheduling. And as always, much light, love, and happiness to you.